Hello and welcome to another episode of Epic Events. My name is Candace Davis and I'm the Director of Event Programming and Creative Services here at vFairs. I'm thrilled to be joined by Will Curran, founder of Endless Events and creator of the eventprofs community and host of various event industry podcasts like Event Icons, Event Brew, my favorite, and the Event Tech podcast. Will, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Candace. What an amazing intro. And I'm so happy to be talking with a fan of the Event Brew podcast.
I'm a fan. I'm telling you. I know we were just talking about drinks and what we're drinking and what we drank this morning. And I know we're both huge chai latte fans and matcha. So
can't give up the chai. That like chai is life.
It is. Yeah, it is. As we, spring into fall too, yes. I find myself just diving into all the chais here. So we have a lot of things in common, Will, and yes. A couple of things just around events too. But I really wanted to dive in today to talk to you specifically about online communities. They have bubbled up. Everyone is trying one out and creating one over here.
It's a hot new thing.
Yeah. It is what is happening here in 2022 going into 2023. But before we dive into this hot topic, I wanted you to tell everyone out there like where you're located in the world and why you started Endless Events.
Yeah. So I'm personally, I used to joke and say it's where my cats live, or I heard someone say this last week, it's where you pay rent. But I live in Phoenix, Arizona. I used to travel so much that I barely identified with living in Phoenix because I was gone all the time. But now, since the pandemic, I'm spending a lot more time at home now. So I very much got the studio set up and this is definitely the office. And we've been remote for a long period of time, I think 8-9 years now or so. But, so a lot of it feels like I'm finally getting to enjoy my actual remote life at home versus traveling all the time. But yeah, as far as how Endless got started, that's a long, long story. But I actually started in high school when I was 17, as basically, actually like a lot of people, I think I get into the industry as a DJ. And I was DJing backyard parties, eventually started hiring big production companies to be alongside the DJing, eventually realized production was where all of our money was being spent and all where the exciting things of creativity were coming from. So we pivoted towards being a production company and then started writing a lot of content online and doing our awesome podcasts. And a lot of people started coming to us for more than just production. They started coming to us for event technology, event management. So we slowly made the transition toward event management. And then during the pandemic, we got very, very busy because everybody knew us as the event technology company, which I guess, I got lucky that on that play somehow. And, over the last couple of years, just been focusing on producing and doing huge management of large hybrid events, a lot of stuff, doing conferences, conventions, meetings, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And, I must say you're everywhere these days, Will. Literally.
I try to be.
LinkedIn, when I'm registering for massive industry events, you're always on the agenda. I can't not see you. It's like, where's Waldo?
And what's funny is whenever I do my speaking engagements and stuff too, I don't prepare anything. So this is a little fun tip. I don't prepare anything. In fact, I don't do PowerPoint anymore. I do everything on my iPad. I sketch it all out and draw it all out. And whenever I go in to do a talk, I don't have an outline. I don't have a reoccurring thing I talk about. So what I do is 10 minutes before I go on stage, I write down 5 bullet points, 5 things I want to share, or, whatever it is. If I'm doing my trends talk, it's the 5 trends that everyone needs to be aware of. If it's a community talk, I'm doing, here's how to go, why you need a community and how to do it. And I'm literally pulling tips live because I just realized that's we're in this day and age where everything moves so quick. I'm not going to give the same talk I gave, for one person 1 week to the next because it could be totally different. And honestly, I think it's more fun that way too with my personality and presentation style.
Totally. So that's one, tip going into 2023. Just scrap all the, presenters out there and no PowerPoint.
No PowerPoint. It's more fun that way. And I very much love, my presentations are very audience engagement driven. I love when people are going crazy in the chat and I really encourage that. So I think it just all kind of works out well, for what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, totally. And we could talk for hours just about industry trends, like what's coming, what's happened, where we are, current state, all that sort of thing. But I wanted to use this time today with this episode to specifically talk about online communities. And there's been a really big focus on creating and building these communities across all industries, but specifically here in the meetings and events industry. And I wanted to say you've definitely been a forerunner in building a strong and powerful community with the eventprofs community. Again, I see eventprofs community everywhere when I'm scrolling too. I can't get away from it. It's amazing. And I wanted to first thank you for starting to build that so it supports all of the event planners and organizers and everywhere and everyone in this meeting space too. But I wanted to ask you a couple questions around communities. So
let's do it. Let's get nerdy on the communities.
All right, let's do it. First, I wanted to talk a little bit about the eventprofs community and when you started it. How old is it? How did it come to be?
So that's what's crazy about this will blow people's minds. So like as of time of recording this, we are only, what month are we in? Going into October now. So it just hit 4 months being old. Only 4 months. Like a lot of people were like, oh, I thought this existed for years. It's like, no, like I had this idea to like use an actual event platform to show people how you can use an event platform to be used as a community. And, I had that probably a couple months prior to when we started in June 2022. And, it really, it's just kind of the decision to be like, hey, let's go ahead and just do this. It was shout outs to Kyle, who's our head of event technology at our company. And he was just like, he loved the idea. He's been all board on the community idea. And I was like, but I want to wait until you do it right. And he's like, let's just start now and like figure this all out together and figure out like build a massive community online doing there. But what's interesting is that it's luckily I've had a chance while it's a brand new community and community of people. I've had a couple previous communities I've kind of started to build this upon. So it kind of started with the event icons community. Like we had a lot of people who were listening to Event Icons, one of our podcasts. And then we also started building up a big guest list of like influencers and amazing event professionals. So that community kind of started getting built. And that was like the first kind of community within the events industry I started building was this like online live stream, interview the icons of the events industry community. And then during the pandemic, I made the decision I didn't make the decision. Again, I have no clever ideas. Just people usually spark my ideas. Shouts to Nick Borelli, who's one of the hosts of Event Brew. He was like, hey, we've been using Slack to like plan the podcast for so long. Like, most planners don't know how Slack works. Why don't we start an event professional Slack? And I think he told me you should start it because he didn't want anything to do with it. He's just like, I'm too busy. So he said like, hey, start the Slack. So I started up slackforevents.com. I just bought the domain and then set up a Slack group and like 4,000 people joined it. And it was very, very popular all throughout the pandemic. But then, I kind of started seeing this future for like, hey, communities that exist outside of a Slack or outside of a Discord or outside of a social network like, Facebook or LinkedIn. And that's where the idea of kind of eventprofs community came from was like, hey, let's show how you can actually use an event app to create a community for that, mythical like 365 days engagement.
Yeah. I mean, what a story. So 4 months old. And how, I know you mentioned like thousands of people, but how many do you have to date? Do you know?
So we just hit about 500 members, and we do our the community is built on a cohort model. So we didn't want to like always be approved. So let me backtrack. So we built it that we wanted to do an application process because we didn't want to make it as simple as like you join and you get in and you ask your one question, I'll see you later. We wanted people to really want this. We also want to build up like kind of some hype. So we have a referral engine that when you apply, you can get moved up and brought into the community sooner than the 1 month deadline if you refer people that come in. So it kind of built a natural like word of mouth engagement strategy. And then what we do is every single month we review all the applications for anyone who hasn't referred a crap ton of people. And we look through the applications and accept them in there. So we just added our 500th member in the cohort for October and literally just invited all those people in and then they get to join in and all the members and welcome them and all that fun stuff.
That's so cool. And with eventprofs, like what are you seeing? What are people asking? What's the biggest thing that they're wanting to know?
Yeah, and like in terms of like community or like in general with the events world?
In the events world.
I think like most common thing is like it's really interesting. It's like vendor procurement related questions. Like, hey, does anybody know someone that does this? Does anybody have a vendor in this area? What's cool is like I wanted to build a community too where members could like work with each other a lot too. So for example, we get a lot of people who are like, hey, I'm looking for a secondary event manager to come and join me in October. Does anyone exist or be around, or can someone fly in here? Or is anyone based in here? So I think a lot of those are kind of like everyone supporting each other to execute the events is very, very common. I think also people are generally too just like curious about like new and exciting ideas, but definitely the number one questions we see on like our home feed news pages, like, does anybody know anybody that does this, or does anybody have anybody that does this, which is really cool.
Yeah. So it's almost become like this referral job board. And I know with the shortage in event staff, this is probably the Mecca.
I do look out on LinkedIn. So like my trick to getting people to come and join is that people will all the time be like, I'm looking at hiring someone. I'm looking at blah, blah, blah. And I literally just message them. I say, you should join our community and post this, because like there's so many people, amazing people on there that are looking for jobs and things like that. And, I'd love to have our own dedicated job board inside of it, but the event software we use doesn't have like a job board module. And we're only limited to a certain amount of like iframes, and I haven't quite figured out how to build it, but I would love to have like an open source, like community job board within the community for sure to get more people. Cause if we can have someone get a job, like that would be an amazing, like, oh my gosh, talk about a member value right there.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well,
I'm sorry, I'm taking like totally derailing the conversation in 5,000 different ways.
Not at all. I'm having all of these follow-up questions. So I'll remember this. I'll come back to those definitely. But,
sure.
We look at, an event planner organization or anyone out there who's really looking to build this online community. Where do you even start? What would you recommend?
Yeah. Well, I think the good thing is that like for most communities, the question that most people in the community management world, which by the way, like I learned that as I started exploring this, that like marketing's been talking about community as the future for years. And the idea of community management, this is nothing new. In fact, there's like communities for community managers, believe it or not. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to this. It's just the events industry hasn't really talked about it a lot because it hasn't been important. So what I started realizing with most communities is that the number one question they don't get is, where do I start? They most are like, how do I get more members? And that's the thing that's amazing about the events industry is that we don't have to necessarily solve for that, because we already have people coming to our events. We already have this natural community already springing up. So I think like the greatest thing about where to start with this is start with the people that are already actively engaged in coming to your events. The second timers, the third timers, the fourth timers, the people who are already like inside of chat groups, the ones inviting their friends. I think those sort of things, like that's a great place to start, because those are like your evangelists for kickstarting your community. So I think the first place I would start is like identifying that group of people and trying to figure out ways to bring them together. So for me, I think the next step in 2022 is to identify where these people are going to go and how you can integrate it into your event technology that already exists. I think this is kind of like the interesting thing is that likely you already have a community for your event. You might not just realize it, and chances are that someone might already be running it for you. So this obviously depends on the person and the event and all these things like that. But I'll use a personal example. I recently, about like 4 or 5 weeks ago, went to this music festival called Bass Canyon in Washington. It's like bring together like all the bass heads of music and dubstep and drum and bass together. And what was really cool is that I was kind of looking to be like, is there a community already built for this? Is there a place to go to talk about these things? And what I found is I found a Discord. I actually originally found the Reddit subreddit for the festival, but then I saw someone say, hey, the Discord's a really good place to get more rapid answers to questions and, all these things like that. So I joined it and realized there was this thriving community of hundreds of people inside this Discord already talking to each other. The interesting thing for me was that when I looked around, there was no official planner from the actual Bass Canyon planning team as part of it. There was this one guy who's like everyone kind of looked up to, who had been going for years, and he's the one who created it. And he was always reposting tweets and things like that and sharing kind of like what he was hearing from the insider information. But, chances are if Bass Canyon had figured out that this already existed, I'd 100% be like, how can I run this? How can I keep it moving forward? How can I keep that flow of energy and add some value? Can I add ticket giveaways? Can I add meet and greets? Can I start to build this community? It already existed, but chances are the planners aren't even aware of it. So I think that for us as planners, we have a community already there. Now we just need to figure out a way to funnel them. So In the case of Base Canyon, I think the fallacy of this is while the Discord is awesome, I think that they need to be on a platform that they fully control and can do what they need to for it. Discord's almost there. You can do some really amazing customizations for Discord. Slack's also okay. But I think where they really broke down and probably the biggest mistake that they made is that they also have an event app where everyone's doing their schedules and things like that. Why can't that app be the same for the community year round? Why is there not a message board on there? Why is there not a, an online ability to chat with each other? Why am I not using that to network with other attendees? And how can I instead put them all in one place and use that year round? So I think that the first step I would consider for most planners, because they already have a community, is find a place to put everybody and put them in that one place and make that your mecca. Make that your like one place everything goes and nothing changes inside of here. And I think that that's also one of the biggest mistakes I think a lot of communities make is like splintering their audience. They have a Facebook group and a LinkedIn group and all these things like that. But like, with the eventprofs community, my goal is like to turn it into like this one single place that everybody can go. And it's a single source of truth for meetups at IMEX, for, listening to the live streams of the podcasts, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's just the hub, the center of whatever is happening at that time, and I think that's what keeps it giving life, back to the community. Something's always happening. And with a lot of planners and organizers who already have, communities out there, a lot of them are trying to kind of funnel those people, the people who have registered and attended their online event, in person, hybrid, whatever it may be, and kind of pushing them to join the community after the event, almost to keep the event going. Of course, like the 30 days on demand, that sort of thing, but continue it going for as long as, the group is alive, essentially. But what do you think about that concept too for event planners who are trying to build those communities? They have those events, they're kind of pushing them into the communities after the events and trying to let the event live on through the community.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that I see with that model and coming from this all like if you talk to me 3, 4, maybe 4 years ago, we actually recorded a video, and it's probably on our YouTube, which is why 365-day engagement is a myth. And literally, we talked about it. And I think it's such a great point that it's like we all try to shoot for this engagement. And we try to like bring people together. We do webinars all year round, try to keep all the energy going, but it just dies flat. I think the difference between then and now is that people are more comfortable than ever to be online and big online communication first, but also too that people are starting to feel like social media might not be the place they want to go to network or to meet new people or, to have that sense of community. They feel like distracted and icky going on Facebook just to be communicate in a group, like all these things like that. I think that the possibilities for 365 is higher than ever. And I definitely think that it's an exciting place to be because like it creates this one single channel communication that you own and you can do anything with. Email engagement's getting harder and harder. Gmail's doing such a great job filtering out promotional emails, things like that. So when your on sale ticket sale goes on, someone might not even know what's going on. They might not check social media to know, hey, this on sale is going on. But if you have someone in their own community and they're actively engaged and you have the ability to send them a push notification, boom, that's like fire. That's amazing. Yeah. And that's what's really going to take it to the next level. And to kind of jump in with the concept of like with a lot of planners, I think is that they're like, oh, we'll just make this community and then just like open it up and it'll be there. Maybe we'll post like, the on-demand content, but they just expect it to grow themselves. No community like ever really just grows itself. It doesn't just like naturally like, oh, this is great. It seems like that because you see things like, for example, that Base Canyon community, it's not done by the planners. It's not, the attendees are the ones engaging, but if it wasn't for the fact that main admin being so energized and bringing everybody together and the constant promotion that they do to try to draw people in, it probably would just fizzle out and die after the end of every conference. But because it's like, or every, in this case, a festival, but because there's that energy from that main community manager, I think it keeps the engagement going, right? Like there's always someone there to at least respond and say hi or, do an emoji reaction. So it doesn't feel like a ghost land. And I think that's the biggest challenge is that you can't have to do everything you can to not make your community feel like a ghost land.
Yeah. And you guys do this so well within your group. I mean, are you constantly kind of looking at it every single day? And the other guys that you mentioned too, who are kind of based, in the group as well? Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, like part of my thought process with it is always like almost me being my biggest critic is like, oh man, how can I make this better? How can what can I do today just to like add a little bit of engagement? But like, a lot of times it's simpler than we think it is. For example, with me, like what I realize is like every post that comes in, it's got to have a comment on it. So like if I'm not the one posting, I got to comment on it. If I'm seeing a post, I'm going to like it for sure. I even sometimes like, and this is where you start to get into almost like growth hacked kind of tactics. Is like you can do things like, for example, what I do is like I'll always like a post, even if I'm like haven't even read it yet. I just want to make it look like there's more engagement. So then that way it always makes people feel like, oh, there's something going on in here. But there's a lot of things I think that we've realized what we've struggled with too. Like, for example, content inside of the platform and having organized events. We've been struggling to get people to like come to a meet the members or like come watch this live stream of this podcast. But what's been thriving for us is like the main home feed. It's been like popping like 3 or 4 times a day. Someone's posting, asking questions, sharing content with each other, answering each other's questions. So for us, like, I really just try to think like, what are we going to try to do to improve and test today and just constantly move towards that. It feels a little bit like a job at some point, but I think that's really where you start to tap in, people to help you out. And they don't necessarily have to be employees of your company. Sometimes you just have to find the fans within the community who want to co-create and help out with that experience. And that's been really, really successful for us too.
Yeah. And to find those evangelizers.
Yes.
Within that community. That's what you're talking about earlier. If you can really feed into those people and build that trust within the community, then they're going to tell, it's going to grow organically, right? They're going to tell their colleagues, their friends, anyone who's in the events and meetings industry as well. And it kind of grows from there. And if everyone's doing that, if you have multiple, lines of evangelizers, if they go out and do this, there's the next like 500 for you.
Definitely. And if I make like one random suggestion I have for anybody who's looking at starting a community too, is that, it's a marathon. It is not a sprint. They're like, I get to share cool numbers. Like we have 500 people in, but like when we first had our first group people join, it was like 100, and there was maybe like, 5 or 6 people engaging on the newsfeed. And now it's like starting to feel like a momentum is building up, but this stuff is going to take you a year, 2 years, 3 years to build up. Like if you look at, for most of us in the industry, we understand the major like associations, the ILEAs, the MPIs, the PCMAs, like those all started decades ago that took to the point where they're as powerful as they are now. I think we have to think about that in the same way with our communities, is that it's going to take a long time. It's going to take, not just launching it after the first annual conference. You have to remind everybody to come the second year and the third year. And like, I think even the Discord that I'm a part of for this music festival, like you can tell, I think there's like badges, like you can say like 3-4 years. It's been going on for a long period of time. So I think we have to remember that this is going to take a long period of time, and it's not a lot of big efforts at once. It's not like, oh, hey, let's do this big campaign. Hey, let's do all this. It's the commenting on every post. It's the messaging every member who comes in and welcoming them. It's calling the members to get feedback. It's, finding ways that you can make sure that every single member's gotten a thank you card or something like that. It's the little things that exist over the course of a year, 2 years, 3 years that you're going to get an amazing community.
Yeah, you're definitely doing it right. I'm hearing empathy, I'm hearing you really, instilling trust in these people. Like you have joined the right place. This is for you. This was made for you, in hopes that you would come here and grow and whatever that might mean, and connecting, networking with others, just have a voice, asking questions. That's what a lot of planners are looking for right now. Definitely. They have so many questions all the questions they have right now, coming out of the pandemic and all the costs going up. How do I get event staff? How do I manage budgeting for food and beverage? How do I do light design now? It's endless. They probably just want a place where they feel comfortable and where they can be heard with other planners and, people just like you commenting as well and giving some advice.
Definitely. And I think that that what's big about it too is that like they're also looking, I think what's interesting is that people are realizing that like they don't want to have to pay like a $500, $600 association membership to want to be able to connect with other people. And that a lot of times like and not that there's anything wrong with associations in any sort of way. Like that's how I met my first like 20 or so industry friends, associations can be really, really powerful. But I think one of the hardest parts about the association is that when it's all driven from the chapter level to try to get that engagement, when in reality, like you need to be starting online and having one big online community that then breaks off into these separate groups. And rather than trying to lean on each chapter to plan, the events that they're going to be going to, the chapter to like onboard all the members and things like that. Like it really needs this like top down approach, I think, in a lot of ways, because I think for a lot of us right now, like online is coming first. We're going to online first to do our initial networking, especially the newer generation. You know, like you guys heard that I started this company when I was 17, but I'm 32 years old, 33 in like a month. And like the generation and my feelings of people who grew up with technology is that we're not going to pay $500 to try to get information or to meet people because we can get that online for free. There is a need, I think, for communities to be paid. I don't think that everything should be 100% free, but the idea of paying $500 to see what the results are going to be is going to be really, really hard, I think, for a lot of people to justify moving forward. So I think where the exciting thing for this to get the information that they need and the questions that they have is that people are going to be willing to pay like that subscription, $15, $20 a month or so. And, you know, it would have probably added up to $500 a year, but the fact that they can like, you know, come in for a month for a small amount of fee, or maybe get a 30 free day trial and then say, oh, this isn't for me. I think that's where the future is really going.
Agreed. We just can't do things the way that we've always done them. And I think, you know, giving those examples are very true. And moving forward, we can find anything free. I mean, you Google anything, I mean, there it is right in front of you.
Exactly.
And I think, you know, people have to be a little more, you know, goal oriented, you know, coming from someone else's mind, like mine, going into a membership. I'm going to look at the value of that $500, like you just mentioned. Can I go and find that value somewhere else that is right there, connection done? I can join, you know, your event, you know, profs community, for instance, and find what I'm looking for right then and there.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's 100% right. I love that methodology of like, what can I actually do with the $500? Like, could I go to 10 people and give them all $50 to introduce me to 5 other people? And you probably might end up like being more effective with your money in that way. I think too, like we're at this stage where, like, you know, like you said, there's so much information out there. Like when I first was getting into like inbound marketing and content marketing with Endless, we were writing primarily about production related stuff, like how to get around AV restrictions, how to understand all the pieces of quote. No one was doing this stuff, right? Like no one was writing content in the events industry. In fact, like people were sometimes like shocked to be like, wait, Endless Events is an event company, not a media company, you know? And I think that for a lot of people, like the information was scarce. You couldn't find it. But now, like after the pandemic, so many event technology companies and so many companies in general are writing so much content, educating, like information is available at everybody's fingertips more than ever. So I think we have to start thinking as brands, like how are we going to engage also with our, you know, the future of where we're going to be going, you know, how are we going to engage with our audiences? And if we're planning events and we're thinking about how we're going to market those events, like we have to be thinking differently about how are we going to stay on top of our mind so someone comes and buys a ticket for our event. And I can tell you that if someone's, you know, a part of your online community, they love it, they've been engaging with you year round, and then you tell them, by the way, we have a conference coming up, they're going to be the first people to buy the tickets rather than the people who are going to be dragging their feet. You have to send them thousands of email reminders, you know, like you start to build this like natural, thriving evangelist community who's willing to buy tickets to your event. Yeah.
And so with that being said, driving a community like this, it can easily turn in, like you said, to another business almost. Definitely. Where, I mean, you have Endless Events and now you have all the podcasts you're doing and you have, you know, the eventprofs community. How do you keep all of them kind of afloat and with the creativity still flowing for you?
Yeah. So the best, like, and this is another tip for starting up a community, is like, I'm not reinventing the wheel, and like I'm trying to share resources as much as possible. So like one of the things that not a lot of people know about with the community is that like Endless itself is putting resources into it to help, you know, energize it, to show how we organize communities, you know, because this is a service that our clients hire us for all the time. So that's one part of it. It's like I'm utilizing sharing resources between each other. Same with the podcast too. Like we're actually, one of the first ideas I had was like, look, we've been recording all of our podcasts kind of like in the dark, right? Like we did them inside of like something like a Riverside or like a Squadcast, and we were just recording them and just getting done with them. Boom. And people would see it when they saw it. Well, what we said is like, well, if we have these community people who like care about us and want to see kind of like maybe behind the scenes, we're like, why don't we just live stream our podcast? So literally no effort at all. And well, a little effort. I switched platforms where we recorded to one that could actually live stream, but I switched over to a platform that allowed us to live stream. We literally just pushed it to the community. We scheduled it so it's at the same time every single week in the platform's schedule, and people can come just listen to the podcast. And that was something that like took zero effort because we have to record anyways. We're going to have to do all this anyways. Let's just push it to the platform for people to watch. And I think that's like where a lot of people need to think about when it comes to this community. So for example, everyone's saying, oh, well, like, how am I going to create enough engaging content year round to keep people around? It's like, we're probably already doing webinars. So this is what you do. You say, webinars are no longer free on a landing page. Instead, you have to be in the community to get access to the webinars. And you're going to do the webinar either way. Sure, you might see attendance drop down initially, but what you'll start to see is that now you're creating this exclusive content. Now the call to action doesn't become sign up for the webinar. It becomes sign up for the community. So a lot of like what I'm trying to do right now is take existing resources that already exist and let's push it towards, the community as a first point of contact for people like Endless, people who are fans of the podcast, everything like that. And becomes that like one single place. It's becoming kind of like my place where I want all my friends to also be in too. Like, so instead of me like having to go to LinkedIn to keep you updated what my ideas are or things like that, let's go to the community and that's where I'm posting it. So like a lot of times my ideas and my posts and things that I'm posting on LinkedIn, I'm usually posting them in the community first to like see what people's initial reactions are, give them that exclusivity, and then it goes to the platforms either way, and talking about social media too. Like we do so much social media marketing as event professionals, right? We're constantly posting reminders. We're announcing who our keynotes are going to be. We're posting. It's like, well, what if instead of posting all the energy onto LinkedIn and Facebook and all this rented land that you have no control over, why instead you push it into the community and have your social media people focus on posting content to the community? Like before we know it, like we realize like we have tons of resources that can make an amazingly thriving community. The problem is that they're just split, usually in social media, they're in our marketing efforts, and they're kind of spread all throughout. Well, let's like instead try to concentrate it, I think, as much as possible. And that's, I think, one way I keep like a lot of the energy and flow going without having to do twice as much work.
Very smart. Yeah. So this community really is driven. It's where a lot of your goals are placed and a lot of your tasks are kind of placed throughout the week to really drive interaction, exclusivity, create FOMO at the same time, scarcity, VIP access type of group, and for them to kind of get first dibs on everything and then kind of push things out after that to people who are outside the group, right?
Yep. Exactly. Nail on the head.
Nice. And how do you keep things interesting throughout, the weeks and the days for the specific event profs? I know you mentioned a couple of things already, like to them first, but do you push polls out? What other, I'm sure you're doing some really fun things knowing you.
Yeah, luckily, cause we're 4 or 5 months old now, we haven't had a lot of time. So we've been just experimenting like crazy. We're kind of in experimentation mode right now where we're for example, we did a meet the members thing. Everyone said we did a poll, and said, hey, what do you guys want to do? What would you like to see? And we had these two ideas one called Sip and Strategize, which was hey, come and have your coffee or your drink and just hang out and strategize big picture event stuff. Right. And then the other one was that people wanted to meet the other members. Right. And so basically we just set up these things. We put them in one of them. I think both of them actually were in the lounge. So we didn't have to have a live stream. We didn't have a lot of production. It was literally if you join or not, it's still right there. The challenge I think that we found with it is two-part with doing all these creative ideas and stuff was that one thing is that we needed to make sure that everybody, because the platform that we chose, we needed to make sure that everybody downloaded the physical app. And it sounds like a familiar cause of event professionals is to make sure that everybody had the app. The reason why that was important is that, we weren't planning on putting the list of attendees into a marketing software to put on an email drip campaign or anything like that. We wanted it that you joined and you customize the notifications just as if it was in Facebook, right? So for us, that was a noble idea, but we found that if people didn't download the app, we couldn't send them push notifications. And the only time they could ever get emailed was when someone viewed their profile or someone commented on their post. Well, the problem is if someone just comes in, never posts anything, and then they just kind of ghost, it was really hard to engage them. So over the course of the last 5 months, we've realized one of our biggest goals is make sure everybody has the mobile app on their phone because that's the best way. And the vision I have for how attendees should be communicating and everything like that should feel like Facebook, where you just open up the app and you get what you need immediately. You don't have to go to your work email and then, all those things like that. Right. So, sorry, I know I'm going a little off topic, but I think in terms of all the exciting ideas, I think the best thing that you can do in the beginning is just experiment. And that's why I think having a founding group of members in the beginning is really important. So the first month, what we did is we said, hey, I'm looking at launching this. It was very beta will idea on here. And I was I built a website. I barely had a logo. I was let's just get this up. Let's see how many people signed up. And when I started seeing lots of good positive feedback about people wanting to be a part of it, I was okay, let's go ahead and do this. And I invited the first, I think, it was 80 or 90 people in. And I said, by you being the first people that signed up in this first month, I gave them all the title founding member. So they all have founding member on their group. And, I'd love for if the platform showed the name that they're founding members next to it, but unfortunately my platform doesn't do it. But the idea was like, hey, let's make these people feel really important. And what we did is we gathered a ton of feedback from everybody. And that first month was great. We weren't doing a ton of content. We had the feed basically up, but compared to where it is now, we're like, 4 or 5 posts, a day or a week or so like that. We were lucky if we got like 1 post a week. It was mainly like Will posting down the line. But I think the best thing you can do is just experiment like crazy, because what we thought was going to work didn't work. Like the fact that we did this meet the members thing, we're like, everybody asked for it, they wanted to do it. And like no one showed up to it. And I was like, what? Why not? And what we're finding is like within our community, within this initial part, is that like most people are not coming to engage with the content. They're coming to engage with each other within the feed. So the feed's been like popping. It's super successful, but like we've been struggling to get people to actually engage with the content. So I don't necessarily have the answer for that quite yet, but maybe check in with me in a year or so and I'll figure out exactly what it looks like. But chances are for your event that you already have webinar attendance and things like that. Maybe you're offering, credits for continuing education, things like that. That might be easier for you to get people to engage with the content and keep within it. But for us, we're kind of like resharing a lot of content that's happening outside the industry. So until I think we have like a massive amount of exclusive content, I think it'll be kind of hard to do.
Yeah.
So.
And specifically for platforms, for anyone else who's out there, eventprofs or, planners, organizers who want to get started with the community, what platforms would you recommend? I know, we currently use Slack. A lot of people use Slack for their communities, and then you're using this specific platform built in with the app that you're kind of pushing, which is Genius. Yeah. What would you say to them? Any suggestions, recommendations?
Yeah, I think first I would say is like get off of social media, people generally I think don't like social media anymore. And even if you say you do like social media, there's someone sitting next to you who says, I really find it toxic and I don't enjoy it at all. So I think that second you can move people off it. I thought that was going to be the biggest dissent I was going to get for people wanting to join it. It was like, why would I join this? Well, I'm in a LinkedIn group with 11,000 other people, right? But no one, a lot of people are energized about getting off of social networks and social media. So I would start with that because, again, rented land versus buying land. You would never remodel a house that you're renting, right? So I think that's the first step. The second thing I was saying is maybe potentially if you don't have an event app or anything like that, look at something like a Discord or Slack. I think they're really customizable. They're really great. Slack's a little hard because a lot of the cool features that you can do are you have to pay for because it's obviously they want to make money and things like that. Whereas Discord is a little bit more confusing to use, but you can do a lot more with it with the free availability. They make their money off of individual users subscribing versus companies moving everybody over. But I think the ultimate, way you want to go is utilize the software that you're using for your events. And this is where I think my vision for eventprofs community too was that I had the Slack community already. It was actually kind of in a weird way, it was thriving. It was doing pretty well. Why switch completely to another platform? Well, I wanted to demonstrate that you didn't have to split your resources. You didn't have to spend money on building a Slack community and then also having an event app at the same time. I wanted to show how a lot of these event apps have the basic functionality of communities. So basically we picked a platform that did everything we wanted to do. It had a home feed, it had the member list, all these things like that. It was customizable the way we wanted to. And then we just doubled down on that. And I will admit there's tons and tons of limitations across all these event platforms. But I believe that all these event platforms want to move towards this community model. They're seeing that they need to have year-round revenue. They're seeing that, the companies that are doing these communities end up having more successful events. It's making the app be used more often. So I think really where the future is if you can utilize one single platform for everything, for your webinars, for your events, for your community, put it all in one single platform. And the important thing about that is that's how it makes it so sticky too, that people are going to utilize it. And that's a problem that I think with a lot of event apps and event platforms is that we end up getting stuck at this point where we build up all this energy inside the event app. And then we say, and now come over here. And then they're like, another thing, another platform, all these things like that. And that's honestly, I think I don't have necessarily an answer for it. I think we're doing an event tech podcast in a couple months where I'll probably maybe have an answer for it. But how do you fight the idea of people being on too many platforms and having that fatigue of being in too many places at once? That's probably your biggest challenge. And the best way you can fix that is by concentrating all your energy in one place rather than splitting it across multiple places.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that makes sense to be on a platform for all those needs within that community. And, once you roll out a conference or whatever you might be having, or roundtables or, some sort of discussion, like the sips that you talked about, let's come drink coffee, matcha, chai, and let's talk about, big picture. Let's talk about, let's create an event just on paper. Let's do it. Let's let's brainstorm a place where those things are, really growing and thriving.
And it's easier to get an attendee to be like, oh, if they're already in the platform year round, to say like, oh, now that you're going to use this continuation of this app. And I think that's really, I think where a lot of these event apps are great, is that they have a lot of ability to filter and put people in different groups and show different information in different groups, show the VIPs information than the non-VIPs. Like, you can do that really easily, where you can just say like, okay, now you've bought your ticket. Now you unlock more of the platform. It becomes, I think, a more enjoyable experience than being like, oh, hey, like, I go over here to go over here. And I'm a big fan of single sign-on, like as a technology, like the idea that you can have one login, it takes you everywhere. But like, I can tell when I'm being thrown around to different platforms as things are coming around. Like, a lot of times too, it's the things feel a little different. And that's the hardest part, I think, with user experiences when you're getting thrown around to different apps. It's like, okay, this looks familiar, kinda. Let me see, where's this? And I think what the problem with single sign-on is that most people don't implement it really well, to the point where like, you get thrown over this app, but they're like, oh, now set up your profile again. And you're like, I already gave you all of my blood details and my, my favorite artists and all those things like that. And like, now you're making me do it again. The only thing you brought over is my first name, last name, email address. I have to upload a picture again. Like, that just sounds like a poor user experience, versus being like, I signed up once, I'm in once. And then also from a data perspective too, imagine being able to track all your data from community all the way to the events and back on there too, I think is really, really powerful. So anyways, I'm ranting on. I can go down one.
No, this is great. Talking about data, so I wanted to talk to you about that. Since you're using a platform and you have the mobile app with it, are you tracking traffic, where the audience is going, like, what forums they're going in, where they're going all around the platform?
That's the best part, I think, about these event apps. It's like since the pandemic, like, so many have doubled down into having really great analytics, right? And so like, I think that's really where the power comes in too, is that like, if you choose something like Slack or Discord, like, you don't really get a lot of data. Like, you might be able to somehow track to know that person clicked on a link in Discord, bought a ticket, maybe. But like, what's great about these platforms is, you can see where they're spending the most time. What, if you're doing exhibitors and partners in the platform too, like, where are they spending that time? Like, the data becomes way more rich. And then, I think if you layer in something like a HubSpot or a Marketo, or you're really good at Google Analytics, you can track all that sort of stuff. And I think really build out a great customer lifecycle and really know where they're going in the platform and all throughout. So like, that's where I think like a lot of these platforms are really fantastic, is that you can get so much data. And again, like, this is as time where social media networks are able to track less and less, where people are now getting confronted with, hey, do you want to track cookies? And they're like, I don't necessarily know if I want to track cookies on here too. Like, you need to be able to find new ways to gather insights as far as, is a person ready to buy? Are they ready to, do this level, whatever it may be. So if you're planning an event that is something beyond just planning an event, it's as a marketing event or it's a user conference, you're just going to get so much more data than you've ever had before. You're almost not going to know what to do with it. That you're going to be like, oh, we now know who's connecting with who. We know who knows each other. We have our own social media network graph, like, to kind of work upon. Like, it's going to be really, really powerful for all that data to be moved internally for you to know about.
Yeah, and it's really brilliant that you're doing this on a platform with this community specifically, because you know where you need to grow and what you need to do and what's thriving, and what to really step into even more and open doors for too. Do you guys do some sort of matchmaking, or how do individuals connect with each other on the platform, like through the app, chat rooms, forums?
Yeah, so we have like a home feed that's like, I wanted it to feel like a social network when you logged into it. So like, you immediately come to a home feed where you can post something or read everyone's comments and things like that. So that's one of the ways that everyone connects initially. We have a member list. I wanted to make it so it was filterable based on stuff people found was important. So like, for example, I have it where everyone puts in what state they're in countries, and I allow anybody to filter based on it. I don't let them do city though, just so then that way, like, oh, I can look at who else is in Arizona. I can quickly be like, hey, are you in Phoenix? whatever it may be, without creating a sense of like, oh, everyone knows where I am. But that's one way that we connect with people. And obviously there's messaging within there. There's ability to schedule meetings and look at each other's calendars. And then, obviously, like, I would love for the events to be ways that people mash together inside of there. But what I found is just between the home feed and the member list, people who are like, I literally was talking to someone today, a member, and they're like, yeah, I met this person, this person, this person because of the community. And, I don't think that they necessarily posted anything trying to meet those people. They just naturally were running into each other and meeting each other, seeing each other in the member list or whatever it may be. So it finds that like the community will naturally network within itself. And honestly, I think that's where virtual events and digital events have really struggled, is that people are like trying to force in some sort of networking element. But in reality, like if you put people in a good group and they allow them to have conversations, it just naturally happens in its way. And that's why, like, in-person events, everyone just throws a happy hour together because somehow at some point, the networking is just going to happen on its own. But like when you do this online, this can happen all year round. Like this has happened in the last 5 months and I have no idea. Like I'm not enforcing it. I'm not forcing it to happen. I didn't introduce anybody. It just happened on its own. And I think that's like really where the power of online definitely comes in.
Yeah. So what's your kind of push over the next couple months as it leads into 2023, specifically for the community?
Obviously I want more people to be exposed to it than possible. So I always am just trying to like make more people aware of it. So I think that's one of the big parts of it. I would love to try to solve the like why we're not getting as much engagement in the events that we're planning. I also think that it might have to do with a little bit of the fact that like I'm getting to the point where the community is getting large enough that I need other people to help me out. So we tapped into a couple of our most evangelist members to be like, hey, why don't you help out with this area? Why don't you help with this area? And I think getting people involved in the community who are like, that's their passion, is putting on unique, cool events. Like I love doing that sort of thing, but I also do that for a living. And I also am constantly being asked to do that. So like, I'm like, oh, let's find someone who this can be their creative outlet, in some ways. That's what I'm looking forward to in the future too. And then I think the other thing too is that like we're getting up to the point where like next week is IMEX. So we're doing like, hey, let's meet all together in person. So like my goal is this first one, we probably won't have a ton of people just because not everyone's aware that IMEX goes on, but I'd love to turn in like a yearly tradition into like, let's all meet up at IMEX. And I would love to see those online communities and connections that have happened where people have never met in person. And then later we say, hey, let's all meet at this one bar, like no agenda, nothing. And then boom, like just seeing the energy that comes from the people who have never met in person, but been talking to each other online. Like that's so magical. And I've done that through so many different communities in the past. I'm looking forward to that and with the eventprofs community.
Yeah, especially going back in person and people coming together. We had a really cool social mixer here in Nashville a few weeks ago, and just the energy in the room, we were just there, we're eating food and, drinking all the coffee and chai and all the other things too. But, it was just really cool to see event planners and organizers come together and the synergy that was happening within the room with people connecting that you knew were probably going to connect at some point, but I had to stand back at some point and just kind of look over the room. And it was just really neat to see these conversations happening and for this to be a thing again. I think
Definitely.
People really enjoy getting together and a lot of people don't. And I completely understand. Sometimes I'm not as social as I appear to be. I'm somewhere in between, the extrovert and the introvert. I'm somewhere in between that line. But it was really neat to see people coming together, and especially in events and talking about what's ahead for them and what's coming down the road.
Definitely. And I think that we're at this stage too where like you have the option to like build this online community and build this like evangelist list of people that you can instantly sell tickets to. Like that's, I think, going to be one of the biggest challenges in the next 3 years is that, as social media becomes more and more wary, as costs of advertising go up, as email clients start to get more filtered, we're seeing text message filtering now because we're getting spam so much on text messaging. People don't ever answer phones. It's getting harder and harder to reach people who don't want to explicitly communicate with you. So like you need to find that new communication channel just to simply announce that you're going to have a conference. Like we need to make sure that we do that. And I think that community becomes that channel that you build on your own that you don't have to worry about like in 10 years, are they going to change the algorithm or are they going to put a new spam filter on here? Like you don't have to worry about that when you own the entire community and run the whole entire thing.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant. Wow. Will, before we end the episode, I should say, where can listeners find you? Again, I know you're everywhere, but
Yeah, I'm trying to like make myself less available everywhere and more concentrated because I used to be like, yeah, you find me anywhere, and then I'm like, I realized I like miss like DMs on Twitter and be like, I'm so sorry a year later. But for the fastest way actually to find me, believe it or not, is actually, to join the community. Like all those messages, I have it set that like the eventprofs community doesn't get filtered by any of my focus profiles on my iPhone. So like if you message me at 2 o'clock in the morning on there and I'm awake, like I will see that message. So the community is one of the best places to find me. Also, if you'd like all these ideas and want to continue hearing my thought processes or anything like that, you haven't heard of Endless, go to helloendless.com. You can check out our blogs or podcasts, all that fun stuff. And then, probably the place I'm like second most active, but honestly, I would love to make it where I'm no longer active on there and only active on our community is I'm also on LinkedIn too. So people can always connect with me on LinkedIn. However, like I get so many spam messages on there that I'm like trying to get out of LinkedIn as fast as possible. So come join me on the community.
There is a very short window and it's closing every single day. Go and find it on the community.
Definitely.
Awesome. And for any listeners who haven't checked out, the eventprofs community and your podcast, I mean, it is a must for anyone out there. Please, especially EventBrew. I listen to the others as well, but EventBrew is like my main go-to. Yes. Will, anything that you want to leave us with?
Definitely, I think just, if a lot of people I think right now like are really excited about this idea community, but it feels overwhelming. But I think the thing to keep in mind with it is that, again, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So the best thing you can do is at least explore and try to go after it. Like that's where I saw with the eventprofs community was that the upside was so high if it succeeds, but if it fails, like everyone will just have learned from the experiment. Like I don't think anyone out here is like, oh my gosh, that like I absolutely hate that brand because they have an inactive Facebook group. Like no one, if a Facebook group or a community goes dormant, people just kind of forget about it. And sure, it sucks to put that much energy into it, but chances are that once you start that community, you're going to immediately start to see results from it. And that's the thing I think I've seen with the eventprofs community is that immediately people responded that they loved it. I was seeing people connecting with each other. So like worse comes to worse, in a year from now, if this community were ever to like fail, which it probably won't at this point because it's getting so much momentum, but like if it were to happen, there's still tangible results and connections that happen from it. And I hear it all the time too with like the Slack community. It's like even though we've shuttered the Slack community in favor of the eventprofs community, people all the time still comment about how that was so helpful for them at that point in their career. And so I think that's the thing I would add with it too, is just like, don't hesitate to just go after and do this. And if you're worried about the workload, just get one other person to be in on with this with you, someone that you can collaborate, talk to and things like that and work with on this. And it'll help you make you feel a lot better and a lot more energized for doing it. So like for me, that person is Kyle. I got to give a big shout out to Kyle, who really, he's the one who said, let's go ahead and do this. And he's the one who we hopped on weekly calls and he's like, what does the community need to be? What should we do with this? We could do this better. And and I would say that we haven't necessarily put our full-time energy into this yet. But with just a little energy that we put into it, we've seen really great results. So I know that anyone can do this if I can. Yeah,
sure. So Will says, just go out and do it. Do it. That should be the name.
Yes, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for being on this episode. It's really been a blast talking with you about communities and just events in general.
It's been such a pleasure, Candace.
Oh, thank you. And many thanks to everyone tuning in and listening to this podcast. I want to say too, if you're interested in chatting with us here at vFairs, we're always available. You can find me on LinkedIn, Candace at vFairs.com. Also, feel free to email us too at sales@vFairs.com to get in touch specifically. And until the next episode, peace, love, events. Bye, everyone.
Bye.